All right, welcome everyone for the 87th time since COVID. We've heard the woman telling us that we're being recorded. So all of this is being recorded. So if you have to skip out early or you want to hear parts of it again, we will send out this replay tomorrow. Quickly to some changes in our webinar. We're going to be moving from a 2 a week to 1 a week. And next Thursday will be our new time at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, with the replay immediately sent out the next day. So thank you for adjusting to our schedule. As I just mentioned, this call is recorded. We welcome contributions by all of you. Every now and again, I'll get a text from someone that says, I don't feel comfortable asking the question. No problem. Simply put a note in chat. Someone on our team will respond, and I'm grateful to my entire team for joining, from Ken to Scott to Sam. Michael Santos will be listening to this webinar, I believe, but he'll be driving home from Northern California. So Michael will be chiming in as well and offering insights, which is very helpful. And in addition to thanking my team, I'd like to thank all of you for attending as you go through this very difficult process. Based on the names, and I recognize many of them, I know many of you are home from prison. And even though we're going to cover today preparing for your surrender to prison, we're grateful that you're here. And I'm sure our team will touch on some things that will help you as you continue to go down this road. I am going to mute all of you, though I noticed everyone has gotten much better about not talking during the webinar. So that's really great. But just in case, I will invoke the mute button. And again, I encourage all of you to ask questions via chat or raise that hand. Occasionally I forget to see that hand up. I'm going to do a better job. As we discuss preparing for your surrender to prison, I want to open with a few text messages and calls that our team receives every week from people who are going to prison and people who are home from prison. So following the webinar last week, someone said, a great webinar, I'm learning. Here's my question. I want to know on a 30-month sentence when I'll be home. Can your team tell me exactly when I'll be home? What do I need to do to ensure that I'm home as quickly as possible on a 30-month sentence? And I was offering some insights. It's the same insights we offer on the webinars, but this very nice executive continued to default to, I get it. Can you just tell me on a 30-month sentence when I'll be home? And I'm sharing it with you because this person didn't want to discuss with me the work that it would take to try to get him closer to what he wants, which is a more productive time through prison and getting home as quickly as possible, without our team guaranteeing when that it could actually happen. So I want you to be different from this person who only says, what can your team do to get me out as quickly as possible? We can't change the past, can't change the fact that you're immersed in a government investigation. We're sorry that you're going to prison. Everyone on our team has gone through it. And rather than just tell you what you want to hear, which anyone can do, make up a number on a 30-month sentence, you'll be home on this date to make you feel better. Our team would rather remind you of the work and the discipline it will take to get you or him or anyone closer to that goal. And how do we get there? What's the next step in that process? The next step, is I see it, is embracing the reality that this experience is going to continue. There will be more crisis to come. So many people going through this system look back with a great deal of regret. If I knew this then, what I knew now, things would be different. We don't want any of you to say that about our team and how we're trying to prepare and educate you. We don't want to hear any of you speak about us the way so many people speak about their lawyers. Frequently, we'll ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about a lawyer? Someone yesterday said, can I go below 0? So we don't want any of you to feel that way about our team. And to get you what you want, it's going to require a great deal of work. So what's the next step then? If I were you, much like many of you may spend time watching Netflix or Hulu, as I know I like to do in the evenings, I beg you to spend time on our website going through the massive amounts of resources that we create for you at absolutely no cost. I've said it before, I sound like a broken record. It's just an investment of your time. So when I asked this person who called to say, tell me how your team can get me out in 30 months, I'm hiring guys, I'm looking to spend money. And I say, it's all free, don't give us money. I'm looking for the number. If you give me the number, I'll hire you. Rather than engage in those sorts of conversations, I would rather have you go down a different path, which is spend the time going through the massive amounts of resources that we create at Prison Professors. All of our prior webinars are there. So when I asked this executive, are you familiar with the First Step Act and how it will benefit you? Dismissed it. We've covered that on a webinar. Do you understand the Second Chance Act and how that can impact you? Yeah, I've heard a little bit about it. What's the big deal? Totally dismissed it. We've covered it on a webinar. When I asked him, what is your path or plan to avoid problems in prison? He was very dismissive and said, dude, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to use an iPhone. And it's kind of analogous to, if I said that correctly, if I were to ask you 5 or 10 years ago, or Marcus, or some Mark, now you've been designated. Marcus, if I can ask you a question, if you don't mind engaging me, thank you. Marcus, if I'd asked you 5 or 10 years ago, do you think you'd ever be involved in a government investigation and potentially go to federal prison? What would you have said to me? Unmute it, Marcus.
Yeah, I would have said absolutely not.
So when you became immersed in a government investigation, I know it was a shock. How do you feel as if you responded once you learned?
I mean, I was kind of, I mean, when these kind of things happen, I mean, I guess you kind of sort of, I kind of responded better than I actually I would. I thought I would be like freaking out all day long and just, you know, going crazy. But I think I've handled it pretty well from start to finish.
What we want we want all of you to say, moving forward, I responded appropriately with a plan. And when someone says to me, dude, I'm never going to get into trouble, I'm not going to use an iPhone, I don't need to watch a webinar on disciplinary infractions. That's similar to me asking someone, do you ever think you would be involved in a government investigation? It will never happen, yet it tends to happen. So if you want to be prepared for prison and you want to have the most productive experience possible, whether or not you get out early, whether or not the work you do influences a case manager or someone you may or may not meet, it's going to require you to invest tons of time, we think, between the webinars. So we've done the webinar on disciplinary infractions, on the First Step Act, on the Second Chance Act, on scores of details. So I encourage all of you to continue to go through that. In fact, Sam or Scott, would you do us a favor in the chat? Please put up a link to some of the resources that I encourage people to go through, including the webinar on disciplinary infractions that we are going to rediscuss next week. We're going to kind of do a reboot on our webinars. Today's preparing to surrender, and then we're going to go through disciplinary infractions next week. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't watch them. I also think it would be helpful, Scott or Sam, if you put up a link to the interviews we've done with our subject matter experts, because everything we're offering in part comes from people we've interviewed, people we've learned from. It was concerning recently when I spoke with someone who has attended 7 or 8 webinars, reached out to me and I said, well, tell me about your reentry plan. He's like, yeah, I haven't gotten around to that yet, which is surprising because he attended the webinar on reentry plans and release plans that Michael led. We shared Michael's release plan, and yet he said, I haven't created it yet. What do I have to do to get out as quickly as possible? All of these things are absolutely connected, and it's going to require you to do a lot of work. As I continue, Cheryl, I see your hand up. It's really wonderful to see you. Thank you for always contributing. Good to see you. What's your question?
Thank you. I was going to call Sam directly, but maybe other people can benefit from my question. So when you enter prison and you do that on the computer, saying your pattern score thing that gives you the opportunity to take part in the programming for the First Step Act, and it's in between that time and the time when you're meeting with your case manager or counselor or whatever, how do you find the programs? Is it like on a bulletin board somewhere? Do you just like, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you actually start that process quickly so you're not waiting for it to happen and you're making it happen?
Scott or Sam, I'll defer to you if you can answer Cheryl's question. Scott, I know you were in custody during the, do you have any thoughts?
Yep, just had to unmute there. It's interesting. There's a lot of things that we want the answers to before we show up, but we have to wait until we get there to navigate it. And for me, that was the programming. Is you'll log on to TrueLinks, the computer system, to email family, and all of a sudden on their digital billboard or bulletin board, you see an option to join classes, and you just need to submit a request to join them. Some of the classes, though, do have restrictions on the number of inmates who can be participating at one given time. So it behooves someone to check that regularly and stay on top of it.
Great,
thank you. But before I transition to a screen share as we surrender to federal prison, I want to share something.
Justin, I'm on the mute. Is it okay if
Okay,
I
yes.
pop in?
Michael
Hi.
Santos, you can always pop in, my friend.
Yeah,
So
I'm
good to hear from you.
I'm driving from Northern Cal to Southern Cal today, but just wanted to pop in on that because it's a great question about how do you find these programs. What's important to understand about the Bureau of Prisons is it is a very big bureaucracy and there's a lot of complications. That said, there's also like an informal grapevine that goes on around the prison. And right now, the True Links program that Scott described, every person has access to it in the prison. Not every person goes and checks it regularly. That can be a flaw. That's one of the things we want to prepare people for, is to make sure that they do look at their TrueLink system, even if they're not corresponding. They need to know what's going on in the prison. Number one, the first thing they got to do when they get there is make sure they're doing those surveys, because those risk assessment surveys are necessary to qualify to become what's called eligible for earn time credits. That's the first thing, and that will be on the TrueLinks system. Second, there will be those postings on TrueLinks, but there will also be word of mouth going on around the prison.
Mhm.
It is a place that's starving for information, and people are going to hear about programs and they will learn about them. There's not going to be a program that somebody says, "Oh, I didn't know." There will be a lot more of, "I don't want to do it." Okay. And so that's why it's so important to always focus on saying the goal is to get out quickly, because once you get in there, sometimes it's hard to realize I've got to be active all the time. And fortunately, there are some new things. I've been touring prisons, and there just recently they've introduced the tablets. So, and I saw them in federal prisons. Soon, the tablets that they have right now are really only for entertainment purposes, but soon those tablets will also include educational programs that people will be able to do from their cells. So I think that your question, understandably, is how are they going to know? They're going to know. But they have to be always managing themselves and focused on that. So TrueLinks is important. Word of mouth is important. Tablets are coming, but BOP is just a slow moving beast, and I don't know when it's coming, but I know it's coming because I'm contracting with them to present programs for their tablets. So just wanted to let that information out. I'm still very optimistic that things are getting better, but it is still the Bureau of Prisons. And Justin, I'm going to go back on mute because I'm getting into the car and all, but thanks.
Thank you for contributing. As we transition, I want to spend 1 minute helping you understand when you're in prison, and once you realize like this experience is going to end and you're going to come home, oftentimes the reality will set in, like, what do you do next? And I share that because many of you come into our marketing arm, White Collar Advice, by way of some marketing that we have done. And of course, everything we're giving to you is free through Prison Professors. I want you, as you think about preparing for your surrender to prison, life in prison, to do what Michael encouraged me to do in prison, which is think 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Now, Glenn on our team, who's working with us, and so many others have absolutely done that. I share that because when I was in custody and I realized, like, wow, I'm adjusting, okay, I'm avoiding problems, I'm going to be home soon, I was scared about what life would look like on the other side. So with Michael, we began to engineer and architect this plan that would help me years and decades after my release from prison. I want all of you to think about that same thing. So we have to go through the nuts and bolts of surrendering successfully, avoiding problems, trying to find the best job, creating your release plan. But from there, we want to ensure, and we cover this in our webinars, maximizing your productivity while you're there, because what we don't want is to receive the call that we get from so many people who are home from prison. They're struggling. They regret going to the halfway house. They wish they turned it down. Their job isn't approved. The probation officer is not giving them higher levels of liberty. And many of them look back and say, I kind of wasted my prison term. I wasted 4 months of my prison term until I had some of these aha moments with Michael that include, what is the rest of your life going to look like because you've been to prison? I don't want you to waste 4 months. Part of the reason we're filming this webinar today is so you're ready to do it on day one. And I see we have a lot of questions coming in that we're going to address. So as we transition to our PowerPoint or screen share, I'm preparing to surrender. There's a good exercise that all of you should go through before your surrender to prison, presuming you've been designated and you know where you're going. Very easy to go to www.bop prison.gov. Okay, and also if you're wondering if you're in the system yet, you can also put in your name and put in my name, and there it is. Like our social security number, it's there forever. My release date and name, you're going to be in that system as well. So I encourage you before your surrender to prison, and I'll pull up Miami because I know someone on our webinar is getting ready to surrender to the camp in Miami where San Miguel served time. We'd encourage you to spend some time reading the admissions and orientation handbook. Some of these are kind of outdated. In fact, I mean, this was revised in 2013. So this is like 9 years late, but it's still a good exercise as you prepare for your surrender to prison to read this document, to learn more about the culture of confinement and disciplinary infractions and things of that nature. Scott, curiously, before your surrender to federal prison, did you read the inmate A&O handbook for Yankton?
I should have. I ran into that issue with the halfway house, and it's a good lesson in humility. I showed up to the halfway house. I was thrilled to be out of prison. Thought, look, I'm not drinking and I'm not using drugs. I'll be where I'm supposed to be. I don't want to read this 50-page handbook. Give me my iPhone. It's been 13 and a half months. And we weren't allowed to use credit cards. It came as a surprise to me. And they reviewed your financials and they said, what's this payment to American Express? And it caused a little bit of a hiccup for me, to say the least. So I agree with you so much in this realm, Justin, that it may be boring to sit there and read this A&O handbook, but when you show up to prison and they give it to you, that's it. You're on the hook for every rule in there. There's no, I didn't see this, I didn't know about that. That doesn't work.
Right. So it's a good idea to, and again, like everything else, in between our webinars, you want to continue researching, learning, and studying. It will absolutely pay off because it is very much, as I learned, kind of self-paced and self-directed. I hit the compound and it was just sort of like, go to laundry, go to the dorm. And I was sort of on my own. And I wish I had been more prepared. Reading the A&O handbook before I went in would have helped a little bit. Even issues like commissary, people will ask us, can you help us fill out your commissary list? It's not a good use of our time. I might like Coke and you may like Pepsi. That said, it's a good idea for you to assess what it is you're going to invest in. And frankly, how much money you plan to spend every single month in prison, and something you should consider if you owe money, something that I presume we're going to cover a little bit on this call. So I'd encourage all of you to begin to form a budget as you prepare for your surrender to federal prison. As I understand it, you can spend $360 a month in the commissary. That does not include email, which is 5 cents a minute, stamps, and phone time. There are people who have a lot of means who may spend a couple $100s a month, and there are those who may spend $700 or $800 a month. I think Michael has written, while he was writing books from prison, his core links or his monthly expenses would be higher because he's writing a book through core links at 5 cents a minute. But you should assess now how much you're going to spend every single month. And also what we don't want is we do not encourage you, if you owe money, to surrender with everything at one time. Recently, someone they joined our community after they had this problem. Their husband was going to prison for a year, I believe, and read somewhere that it could cost $600 a month to live in prison. So just planning, the person sent in, I think, $300 to the Western Union, which was the max, and the wife sent a $6,900 check to the PO box in Iowa for a total of $7,200. Under the idea it would be $600 a month for a year. The case manager saw how much money was on his books, saw how much money he owes in restitution. And as I understand it, they might have taken everything except for $1,000, which was very difficult. And troubles can follow if the prisoner was to complain to staff about needing the money, especially if that said prisoner told the judge, I'm going to make amends to my victims and pay the money back. You're sort of boxed in. So our advice is to plan out a budget, assess how much, but recognize
JP,
yes.
I want to throw something in there right now, because there's a lot. We really need to spend more time, and I think we have a whole webinar on FRP. And this is so important for our audience to understand, because we want you to have the most up-to-date advice. And the prison system is changing. Earlier in some of our blogs, we've spoken about the FRP program, where it used to have these agreements. It's voluntary, but Congress is now pushing the BOP to collect more for people who have financial obligations in prison. And we recently had a customer that if Larry is on the call, Larry can talk about what they said they were going to take from this guy. And it was like, the guy had brought in $1,500, didn't bring in $1,500, but had $1,500 come through his account over the past 6 months. And effectively the case manager provided a system where they were going to leave him with about $10 a month. So $40, $1,660 or $1,460 they wanted to take or put him in FRP refusal. And there's a direct correlation between FRP participation and eligibility for earned time credits. There's a lot more that we've got to cover on FRP. I think that should be a very specific webinar to go over it because of the changes on this. And we will provide those details, and I will provide those details of what I am hearing when I go into prisons and listen to what wardens are saying. So it's not only the BOP now, right now, the FRP is voluntary. Everybody in our community should recognize we don't think it's going to be voluntary much longer. We think Congress will pass a law mandating that the Bureau of Prisons collects money. So there's got to be a lot more planning on FRP, understand the policy, and create an expectation of how you're going to get through there, because it's going to be very different from when I served my sentence or when Justin served his sentence. So I will be providing that information as I learn that from wardens by going into prisons, just to apprise members of our community. Okay, how would I respond? That's what everything we do is. How am I going to respond to this huge bureaucracy that is not family friendly and that our lawyers are not going to be able to help us with? So we will continue to update you, but we will do a dedicated webinar on FRP. But I just wanted to say that so it's not just glossing over this very important subject, because family members need to know how important it is, and people who are going in need to know how important it is. And I'm going to go back on mute while I drive.
Right. Michael, you mentioned, somebody who had a similar situation. It was akin to what Justin was just talking about, where somebody sent in a large lump sum without thinking that this was going to carry somebody over for their first 6 months to a year of their time away. And the case manager said, okay, we're going to take that and put it towards your FRP. And even though it is voluntary, as we've discussed during many of these webinars, and I'm sure as we're going to go into further detail in a future webinar, is that there are so many challenges that are put up in front of you, from not being able to qualify for certain credits to getting home more quickly, to limiting your amount that you can spend in commissary, that make it virtually mandatory if you want to be able to enjoy those benefits. So it's very important. A lot of our clients recently have been getting out ahead of the issue, trying to tackle it, trying to tackle it out of the gate by being proactive and discussing it immediately with their case manager. So they're suggesting a certain amount that they can feel comfortable with out of the gate. And in a good way, it catches the case manager off guard and makes them more open and willing to what the person is suggesting.
Thank you, Larry. And to that, one more thing, even though it may be voluntary, we'd encourage you, while it's still voluntary, to make the payments, even though it may be difficult or tough and it may cut into your commissary. We'd encourage you to find a way to make the payments. I see many questions, people asking about money and sending money, thankfully, to the massive amounts of resources we give to you through prison professors. And Scott or Sam, I'd be grateful if you'd put a link to our after sentencing tab in the chat room. If you have questions about how to send money, great news. We did a video on that, an example of how to send money to people in prison, instructions, and how to send it through Western Union, or just a good old stamp to that lockbox, what it is in Iowa. So I'm going to continually reflect back to how I opened, invest some time every day, like we may watch a TV show on prison professors, reading some of the blogs, reading the after sentencing articles. The more you learn, the more prepared you're going to be. We also have, for the after sentencing resources, as you prepare for prison, what the quasi email system looks like. So your family has an idea of what it's going to look like when you communicate with them. An example of the visiting form while in prison. So all of these things are here for you. It's just requires you to spend the time to go through them. So we've covered budgets, FRP, and something we touched on in a previous webinar, having one point of contact before you're surrendered to prison would be a good idea. That could include getting a power of attorney, something that I did not have, and issues popped up for me in prison, and I had to wait, I think it was 3 weeks for a notary to come to the prison, and it was just some things were falling apart at home. So I'm not a financial planner any longer, but if it's power of attorney or someone who's able to handle your affairs. 2 weeks ago, someone called to tell me that 3 days, they were due to go to prison in 3 days. They were fired from Wells Fargo, which is a shame because they had banked with them for more than 30 years. And not only was he fired, his wife was fired, and he found that shocking because she's not a criminal. And it wasn't just the joint accounts that was fired, they fired her too, her own personal accounts. So now he's preparing to go to prison in 3 days with no longer any banking relationship. What to do? We want you to learn from some of these unfortunate stories. So if you've been fired, if you have not been fired, there's a chance you will be fired. And I would encourage you to do what I did when I came home from prison, get used to it, understand it's part of the journey, it's part of the process, cultivate relationships. And I would tell you, we've had many clients, even though it took some time, because it can be an inconvenience changing banks, like going from Macintosh to Apple. A number of clients have said, our people in our community have said, I'm just going to have my wife bank somewhere else than I bank because I can't run any risk. So make an informed decision, but recognize that it can be frustrating to get fired, and you should prepare for these things now because it can be a really big inconvenience to do that while you're in federal prison. That's one thing that I've learned. Does anyone want to chime in or offer any insights before I continue here? Are there any hands up? Anything that I'm missing here? Okay, good. I see questions continuing to come in.
Can I jump in?
Okay. Quarantining in prison does still exist. I did not endure quarantine. I was in prison a very long time ago. Scott or Sam, is there anyone here as people prepare to go to prison, knowing that COVID still exists and there's a chance that people will quarantine? And can anyone in our community touch on the quarantine process or what it was like upon that surrender to prison?
I can, Justin. I think it's
Thank you.
important for everyone to know that you can't call the prison. This isn't like a hotel reservation and say, hey, I'm surrendering on this day. Can you let me know what quarantining will be like? It can change from week to week and month to month. The most important thing is to go in knowing that it's out of your control and to communicate with family that there is a chance you won't be able to speak with them. I mean, when I surrendered to prison, I thought I was vaccinated and I'd be fine. And it turned out I wasn't able to call or email anyone for almost 3 weeks. So just letting everyone know that when you get the chance, you'll reach out to them. And in the interim, you can write letters. But it sounds like COVID isolation periods and quarantining periods are decreasing from what they used to be 1 and 2 years ago.
That there's some.
I'm sorry. I have something to add when you're done talking.
You can add it right. Please add it right now.
Okay, I just got home from Danbury and
Welcome home.
Thank you. The entire month of September, they had a crazy quarantine because we had an outbreak. And what they did is they isolated the people that tested positive and then didn't retest the people that tested positive, but every time somebody felt sick and tested positive, then they would retest the remaining people in the camp. And eventually they had all these positives stuffed into one dorm. And when the last person, when everybody tested negative after 10 days, then they finally lifted it, which was after 32 days. It was kind of a crazy thing.
So thank you for sharing that. And I think that leads into something that all of us, should embrace. And it's easier for me to say because I've been home from prison for a long time. But there may be challenges. There may be things that happen that we absolutely do not expect. And many of you know this process can be hard on your family, those that love and support you. And it is heartbreaking at times when we receive a call from a wife or a child who says he's only been in a few days, he's really struggling, he didn't adjust well. Are you sure he attended your webinars? He doesn't seem to be following the advice. And it's that old cliche, like everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. We know that it's easier said than done, and we empathize with you, but I do want to encourage you that, remind you, there are aspects of this process that will be uncomfortable and difficult. And to the extent that you can prepare for that and manage expectations. For example, recently, someone reached out, they got 18 months, which was a phenomenal sentence, yet they expected probation, even though the guidelines were 60 months. So they're devastated when they should have been thrilled at an 18-month sentence, but they had conditioned themselves and their family for 18 months. So what should have been a great day was a devastating day. I want you to prepare for the fact that you may not quarantine, but recently, Jonathan Ruffet surrendered to Miami and emailed our team to say someone was in quarantine for 7.5 weeks. The guy's vaccinated, triple boosted, but he tested positive. He came out, he tested positive again. And just like that, he expected to be within the camp within 2 or 3 days. He's in quarantine for 8 weeks. These things, unfortunately, can happen, and we can't change them, but we can teach you how to respond to it. We can teach you how to still find a way to be productive. And that comes back to focusing on what you can and cannot control. You may not be able to control how long you're in quarantine or how much a case manager takes of your money towards restitution, perhaps your initial job or bunk, but you can choose how you respond to it. And that can really set the tone when you call home, because I know that first call home, they're going to be nervous and wondering and hoping that you're in good spirits. So we want you to think about these things as you work your way into federal prison. Continuing down this list, I want to talk for a moment about the BOP formulary. And while I'm not a physician, I do encourage you to spend some time on it, as Michael articulated in this PowerPoint, because many of you are in medications. I understand, I hope and presume it's listed in your probation report. If it's not in the probation report, if there are new health issues that have popped up since the probation report, there would be some value in getting a letter from a physician, ensuring that your file is accurate and correct. But you will want to surrender with medications, and there could be some value in working with your physician and understanding what medications you're on, what the Bureau of Prisons may transition you to. Here's a formulary list that I'm looking at that goes back to 2016. This is a long time. It's a long time ago. Sometimes it takes them a while to update it. I share this with you because there are times where someone surrenders to prison and they have taken a medication for quite some time, and they may not initially get that medication. It can be a shock to the system. So to the extent that you can prepare for that now with your physician, we think you're going to be better prepared to how to manage that and how to deal with that. Any thoughts or insights on medications? Does anyone have any questions about medication in the BOP formulary list? Again, that's at bop.gov. We could put up a link to that as well. Does anyone have any questions about the BOP formulary, or anyone want to add anything I should ask? Okay. I see a question before we continue about banks and whatnot. Look, Wells Fargo fired this client, or this person, not a client, fired this person. But I've been with Wells Fargo for a long time, and I served time in prison for fraud. It's weird how these things happen. Some people it never comes up in a background or compliance check. I presume these banks are continually doing them. I would encourage you to cultivate relationships with banks, open up several accounts, just like you should be cultivating your network and everything that our team tries to teach you. But it's very random how these things happen. I have found sometimes smaller bank or regional banks, it's easier to get through, but you need to cultivate relationships and sometimes try to call in a favor, as I did at Union Bank of California many years ago, when they made it seem like they were doing me the hugest favor in the world by taking my $700, but I was grateful to have found a bank. So these are things we want you to work on now as you prepare for your surrender to prison. Okay, any other questions on that as we continue? Okay, so Cheryl, I see your hand raised. Talk to me.
Not a question, but a little piece of advice, being the spouse.
Yes.
So if you're concerned about that part, because this already happened to me, if you have credit cards that are going to be shut down, even as the spouse, not even related, anything is fair game in shutting down, including, sometimes children. So the one piece of advice I would suggest, because it happened to me, if you have an extremely large amount of mileage attached to a credit card, you may want to put it into partner travel accounts and not leave it sitting in the credit card mileage. Because if they shut it down, no explanation, and we just lost, like something worth crazy amount of, retirement travel is gone. And they don't have to explain, but if it was already put into like United or Delta or already transferred from the credit card, we would have been able to keep it. But if you have a large amount of mileage, I would suggest preparing yourself that might get cut off with your credit card.
Thank you for sharing that. It further proves all of the collateral consequences that follow for families, those who have done nothing wrong, but you continue to suffer as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. So we've covered formulary, preparing for your telephone and contact list. I would encourage you to create a contact list. I surrendered with my contact list. I was able to bring it in. Scott, how many names were you able to bring in your contact list? And what was that process of adding those contacts to the core links or email system? Was it pretty seamless?
I showed up with my contact list and they very graciously made a copy of it for me and then let me walk in with the copy of the contact list, just to make sure there was nothing sprayed or anything illicit on the paper. It takes a little bit to add people to core links, but again, it's manageable. You sit down, you find a computer when it's empty, you start emailing friends and family. You also want to have everyone's address. You will need to print mailing labels from the core links account when you mail letters to people as well.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate you sharing that. Lisa, I'll come to you in a second. Questions about vaccination and whatnot. We did an interview with a subject matter expert where it covers that. I'll ask our team. We want to get an answer. We'll get more information on that if you're not vaccinated. In our experience, people who are not vaccinated are quarantining for longer periods of time than people who have not. Michael, if you're available to answer a question, let me know while you're driving. If not, that's fine. But I wanted to address.
I'm available.
Thank you. So
And,
this
and,
comes
and
up
that, before you get on that off that quarantine, we
Okay.
had an interview with a subject matter expert who indicated that quarantine or not, by policy, is not supposed to affect their placement. The only thing that affects placement is did the person qualify, did the person test positive or whatever. Other than that, everybody's treated the same. Again, but in the Bureau of Prisons, what they say and what they do is going to be institutional specific, and it's important to just always recognize that. But now I'll go to your question.
Michael, we've written in the past that, and it's on this checklist here, that the soon-to-be prisoner should try to identify with the prison that they have his paperwork. Could you touch on that? Because sometimes someone may call and say the prison didn't pick up. What if they don't have my paperwork and I'm not supposed to go there? So do you encourage people before their surrender to call the prison to confirm they have the paperwork, or is getting the letter from perhaps from the BOP that they've been designated to a prison enough? That comes up a lot. So I'd love for you to touch on that.
Yeah, we all subject matter. Don't take my word for something. Let's listen to what the retired wardens say. And it was Warden, and he's on the subject matter expert page. Warden Scott, I call him Scott, but I forgot his last name. I don't know if it's clear, but he's the last one on the page right now. The warden there. What he said was, ever since you were in, Justin, or I was in, or I would say it's probably over the past 5 years, it's now automated. It's no longer where it's people who've never dealt with the agency. It's a lot of the agency that are technologically averse and don't want to get involved. But he said they resolved that, and now the marshals push a button, and it's automatically, as soon as you it's all that in a transparent dashboard, so everybody gets to see it. That said, I mean, I always would advise people to prepare and have a plan if they get to the prison and they the family hasn't heard from them for 24 hours, that's when there should be an advocacy plan calling and so forth, just to make sure that's not the issue. I just don't think that's the warden that's on the website. Is that the question you were asking me? 'Cause I may have missed a little bit. You cut out while I was driving.
No, thank you. And your phone is cutting out a little bit. So thank you. Thank you for answering that. I'll transition back to something that Cheryl touched on a little bit earlier about programs. As you prepare to surrender to prison, we want you to use your time productively and to enroll in as many programs as you think will help you, especially in light of the First Step Act. That's something you should do as quickly as you hit the compound, that first full day or second full day in prison. We'd encourage you to walk around the prison looking for programs that you can enroll in. Also consider looking for a job that may be available. I shared the story last week of Jonathan Ruffet, who before he cleared admissions and orientation at Miami, within a week, he found a job cleaning, sweeping floors in the visitation room. And he found out that there was an opening. He went to his case manager and said, I'm applying if it's still open to sweep floors in the visitation room. She said, I'll get back to you. And a day later, she said, fine, you can sweep floors in the visitation room. Had he not done that and just been assigned a job, it could have been the kitchen. It could have been a job that was less desirable. And now he feels as if his adjustment is measurably better. The messages he's sending are just terrific because he's doing his job, which isn't taking a great deal of time, but it's allowing him ample time to focus on and create his release plan, something we've covered extensively. So our team encourages you to enroll in programs that may be of benefit to you and simultaneously to look for a job that may suit your interests. Now, you may go to the case manager, as I did in prison, request a job, and he or she may say, sorry, all new prisoners go to the kitchen for 4 months. Fine. You can't guarantee that you'll get the job you like, but at least you will have tried. A program that's very important to a number of people in our community, we listed here as RDAP. Sam, if you're with us, can you touch on what, I think a lot of people know what RDAP is, but can you talk about the process of formally applying to get into RDAP if you're eligible after your surrender to prison? What's the interview like? When should you apply? That's a very important program because it can help people and lead to time off.
Sure. So I had a 60-month sentence and I turned myself into the camp in Miami in roughly May of 2018. And I was originally told you can't apply for RDAP, even though it was in my pre-sentence report, until the last 24 or 36 months of your sentence. I didn't even know what RDAP was. No one informed me about it. My attorney certainly didn't. So I went the next day in May of 18 to the RDAP building. RDAP has a separate dormitory and a separate building for classrooms. And I put in an application. It's called a cop-out. So a cop-out form in prison is an informal request for something. It could be for a request for a new job or a new bed. In this case, it was a request to be interviewed for an upcoming RDAP class. The next day or two later, I got a response to please come in for an initial interview with the head of RDAP. I went in there, and this was still May. The next class, so RDAP runs typically 4 times a year. It might vary by institution. At Miami, it was February, May, August, and November. Went in, I had my interview. She said, yep, you seem to qualify. Sign some paperwork. We'll see if we can get you in the next class. That was August. Within about 30 days, I was told to move from the dorm I was in to the RDAP dorm. So that was around July of 2018. RDAP's a 9-month program, has 3 different stages that you go through. I found it very, very helpful. I thought it was, not just a great way to pass the time, but the one-on-one groups were very helpful, with the doctors and with the different people in the group. It was 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for that 9 months. So I started in August of 2019. I finished the program in May of 2020. You actually get the year off of your sentence, usually within about 45 days of starting the program. And it's contingent, obviously, on completing the program. But the good news is when my wife went on the BOP website, maybe 60 days after I was in the program, she saw my sentence drop by a year. So that is a very, very encouraging, positive thing. And in prison is, anybody who's been there, you grasp at anything that's positive because there aren't that many positive things. So when something like that happens, especially for your family and loved ones, that's a really important thing to happen. So there's a process to getting in, just like anything. And if it's recommended for you in your pre-sentence report, it eases the transition.
I appreciate that. Next, I want to talk a moment about journaling. Before I do, Lisa B, I see your hand up. Thank you for waiting patiently. Lisa, we're ready for your question.
Yes, I just want to go back to the core links. I understand the process of it. What I don't understand is that there's a $6 to download the app. Is that on a desktop computer too? Is $6 for everybody who wants to correspond with you? Or is that just if you have it on your phone?
Negative. So if they go to corelinks.com, there's no cost. If they go to the app or Android store and download the app, it's $6 annually. That just for so people can communicate with you from their smartphone. So it's free if they just go to a desktop computer.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
I suppose you could actually just go to corelinks.com from your phone as well and not pay. It's just everything's made a little bit easier with the app, but there's a way to use it without having to pay the $6.
Okay, I just wanted to let everybody know if you correspond. Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. So I want to transition for a moment to about journaling.
Can you hear
Yes.
me? JP,
Yes.
JP,
Yes.
Can you hear me? On
Yes.
that app, I was just left a little unclear there, so I want to just clarify if I can while I'm going through a canyon. Nobody has to pay for the app, the $6.
Right. That's what
That is a
yes,
preferred.
correct.
That is a preferred service, and it's helpful because if you do the preferred service, you get notified when your loved one sends a message, and then you go. Otherwise, you maybe keep going back looking for something and there's nothing there. But it's just a preferred app. You don't have to pay it. It's just the upgraded service.
Messages for 60
That's right.
Carol, go ahead. And you retain messages for longer, 60 days rather than 30. So there's very little upside to having it, but some people find it helpful. So I just wanted to clarify that. But nobody has to pay the $6 on you can get the app anyway. But that was all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. I want to transition for a moment to journaling and the value of not just writing in prison to feel productive and document the journey, but also sharing that work with all of these stakeholders that we discuss, from a case manager to a potential probation officer. And Scott, I know you documented the journey in some, or pretty quickly, Scott, if you would, what was the value for you of documenting your journey through prison? How did it help you feel productive, and why did you do it?
Sure. It helped me feel productive in that watching TV serves no one. I found a lot of personal value in writing. It helped me craft my own internal narrative of the experience, right? If you're writing about what's happening to you every day, well, you wake up and you think, okay, what am I going to do productive today? What am I not going to complain about? How am I going to put myself in the driver's seat and take control of this? And writing and creating the website I did, for me and for those who care about me, it really changed the entire narrative surrounding who I was and what had occurred and how I was moving through it.
Thank you very much for that. I know that many people on this webinar don't agree with the Department of Justice's press release. Many people lament over the plea agreement. They would argue isn't totally factual. And it's frustrating to feel like others are controlling the narrative, and it can be very frustrating. So the question is, how can I see people shaking their head right now? Lawrence, I see you shaking your head down there. I know, Jason, I know that's frustrating. I see a lot of shaking of the heads. We can all agree with that. So the question is, how can we work to change that narrative? We can complain and blame the prosecutor, the judge, the case manager. It's not their fault. It's our fault that if we pled guilty and broken the law that we're here, but it doesn't mean we can't work to create a better record moving forward. The question is how, and in our experience, it's not by telling people. I used to lament to Michael in prison when we began to write that it would be worthless because someone told me in the chow hall that I would never be allowed to work with convicted felons and my probation officer would never approve it. And had I listened, I wouldn't be here co-leading this webinar today. So it's going to require you to think years into the future, ask really tough questions, and learn from others who have done it. We want you to learn from us and recognize it may take years for that work to pay off, but it's worth doing. It's worth doing. I beg all of you, do it. But how? Some people have said, I'm not naturally a writer. What do I write? How should I start? So I encourage you, if you have not already, we have a really wonderful journal and release plan that Michael created. And someone recently, before they surrendered to prison, who was scared to death about what they were going to write and who feared they would fall victim to writing only what time they got up, how many miles they ran, and what they ate in the chow hall. And he was like, no one's going to read this after 2 weeks because I'm going to be writing the same thing. I'm going to run out of content. So he went through this journal and release plan, which all of you should do because it gives you great tools and things to consider writing about. So for example, I just randomly opened a page and went to page 46 in this journal and lesson plan. And here are some questions that you can consider writing or journaling about as you work your way through prison. Question 1, Michael wrote, what books are you reading and why have you chosen to read those books? I remember Michael one time in prison asked me the last 10 books I read. I told him, he asked me to provide a summary of the 10 books I couldn't. And he politely said, what's the value in reading them if it's not going to help you in prison or when you go home, you might as well just watch a movie. And as I joked, that's when I tried to avoid Michael for a day because I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to deal with these very tough questions. I wasn't adjusting well. They're very important. So we encourage you, what books are you reading and why are you reading them? What's the value
Justin,
of?
can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
I appreciate all the forward thinking on journaling, but this is much more practical as well. The journaling exercise it is important to understand those subject matter experts and what they said. When we're going into the criminal justice system, we're going into a world that we don't understand, that is fundamentally different from anything else. And if you're in a situation where you've just been sentenced, you've got to remember that according to the prosecutor, the judge has taken everything into your life already into consideration. So your job, and part of our job during the post-sentencing services program, is to help you think, how are you going to differentiate yourself in the future? Because there is going to come a time when you're going to want some advocacy to get out of prison earlier. There is going to come a time when you're going to want to advocate for a higher level of liberty. And what we have to do as people who are in the system, we absolutely have to be thinking about who are the decision makers going forward. What are they trained to do? They're going to be trained to say, if you're going to talk about you want to get out because of something special in your life that happened before sentencing, you've got to anticipate what will your adversary say. Your adversary will say, well, the judge already knew that and took that into consideration at sentencing, so we're not going to give you anything. Anytime you're going to be looking for some type of compassionate release or higher level of liberty, you've got to be thinking about two very important words: extraordinary and compelling. Those aren't my words. Those are the words that every one of those decision makers are trained to look for. And if you watch the interview that I did with Hugh Hurwitz, he said, we want to see iterative growth. That's how the system is designed. We could spend our time complaining about the system. That's great. But it's far more beneficial for every individual to think, okay, I get you to make you stand out. It is to make you look different from everyone else, because they are going to see you as they'll always see me, 163770004. If you don't build an extraordinary and compelling record, that challenge. I'll go back on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Your phone was cutting out. That was very helpful. And Michael mentioned interviewing subject matter experts. Michael interviewed Chris Maloney, and Michael asked him, what's one of the first things your eventual probation officer will do? And I think Chris said he's going to look at the probation report. And that probation report is going to articulate the worst decision you've ever made in your life. And many of you feel it's one-sided and it may not be accurate. So if we know a probation officer is told to us by the former head of probation is going to read that report, is it in your interest to work to change that narrative? And we suggest you change it, not just by telling them what you've done in prison. There are people who reach out to us frequently, who tell us what they did in prison. We ask them if there's any evidence of it, and they don't have it and they regret it. I have no doubt they're telling us the truth, but would they be more successful on a better path if they had that evidence? So journaling is a great place to start, and you should contemplate with whom are you going to share this work. Certainly, it's something that could be shared with a case manager, programmings that you're participating in. What have you learned from these programmings? How are these programmings helping you? Recently, a case manager suggested someone go through a program. They went through it, and the person was very grateful to the case manager for suggesting it. And the case manager appreciated being told that her advice was helpful. So what programs are you going through? What are you learning from them? What books are you reading? Why did you read them? So I encourage you to go through the journal book and to document it every single day. And it's something that you can share with a stakeholder like a case manager or a probation officer, but beyond them, not just them, it's something you could share with a potential funder or a potential employer or people that you want to bring into your network. Scott frequently shares the story, or Scott, share it. When people hear that you're home from prison, what do they ask you because you journaled so frequently? What is the response like now that you're home?
They've read the book reports, they've read the posts, and instead of that general vague question of what was it like, how was prison, we're talking about philosophy, we're talking about historical nonfiction, we're speaking about the posts that I've written in very nuanced aspects of the journey. It's made for such an enjoyable time coming home to be able to converse with everyone on a wide array of topics versus how was prison? Oh, it was bad and the food stunk. It's a better dialogue.
It's a better dialogue, and it forces you to, and then that ties all back to the prison adjustment as you prepare for prison. If you're going to commit to reading and writing book reports, and you're going to commit to journaling, then that deals with the problem that some people have where they find a job that's 30 or 45 minutes a day, and the rest of the day in prison, like they're bored out of their mind. They're just waiting for mail call or phones go down. They're depressed and they're not as productive. It's part of the reason some people may work 8 or 9 hours a day to feel productive, but also they may not feel like they're in prison. So sometimes if you are going to commit to this journaling program for a case manager or a probation officer or a potential employer or your family or your children, it's going to help you feel productive throughout this experience. And then you advance your agenda when you go into a case manager or someone, and you can share with them what you have been doing every single day. Rather than my case manager, who is pretty nice, said, sometimes y'all just stand outside my office asking for more halfway house time and making up why you need it. And I'm sorry, you should have thought about that before you got here. We want you to show them why you could be worthy of it, whether you're successful or not. But people who tend to do it, the experience tends to be more successful. And I was grateful and glad that I followed that advice. We want you to follow this advice and not learn from people who want to break you down or tell you that it won't work in prison. Had I listened to people who said your probation officer will never allow this, I wouldn't be here, right?
Can you hear me, Justin?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So these are really good advice. What I'm really hoping everybody gets out of this is that everybody who's on this webinar and everybody that's in prison wants the same thing. Everybody wants to get out earlier. Everybody. And we want to help you advocate to get out earlier. These recommendations that Justin are offering are not only mindfulness and being productive, it's pragmatic. You definitely want to develop these tools, tactics, and resources that are tangible, that you can use. And that way, when these opportunities open, regardless of what it is, whether it's a pursuit of compassionate release, whether it is a pursuit of advanced placement in a halfway house, whether it is arguing to overcome an obstacle, such as an incident report that can come, you need these tools, tactics, and resources already in your bank account so that you can cash them in when the opportunity comes. We always have to be thinking today about the problems we're going to face 2 years from today. And that's one of the things that we will provide for you while you're in prison is this ongoing communication, and coaching. These are things that work for us. This is what we have learned as tour guides that we want you to be doing, because if you don't do it, it becomes much more difficult to qualify for the things that you want or to get the things that you want. We always have to remember the Bureau of Prisons is not always going to see you the way that your family sees you. And if we can remember that, we've got to sow the seeds to make that happen. And that's what I wanted to share. If you could you hear me okay, Justin, when I'm talking?
Yes,
I'm driving.
we heard you well. That Kent, I'm going to ask you a question. Kent, if everyone listening, Kent is getting ready to surrender to prison to December 27th. And I know he's planning and getting ready, but Kent, as we address preparing to surrender to prison, you're about to surrender. What questions do you have, perhaps that we didn't cover? Or do you have any questions? Help us understand how you're feeling and any questions you have as you get ready to go in next week.
I feel pretty good. I'm taking little notes here. I think it's more of rewatching, I think, some of the webinars that maybe I haven't watched recently to put those back in my face again before I go. One thing that I just wrote down in a question is I know how I'm going to prepare and get my contact list and some of these things. And I know you've got the videos and the webinars on how my family can communicate, like kind of a snapshot on how to use email or how to send money and support. But is there a one pager, almost like here's, I don't know, something that you've given to family or given to friends? Because I know that I was just at a church group meeting earlier this week and they all go, here's my email, here's this, how do we talk to you? What's, I'm wondering if there's something that I could kind of outside of the website, because I know the website's kind of a focal point where everybody could go to. Would it be smart to create a one pager to give them something to say, here's my number, here's where I'm at for prison, here's this, here's that.
I think that's a good idea. And we have done that previously. And it's something we can create almost like a going away letter that informs and educates people about how to send money. Some people presume they can send you home baked cookies and clothes. They don't understand how that works. So I think that's a good idea and something we could certainly work on, where you can insert your BOP number, how to mail you things via Amazon, what people can and cannot do, expectations with visiting. Some people will flat out say, I'm saving all of my phone minutes for my family. I'm sorry, or this is what visitation looks like. I'm going to reserve it for my family. So I think managing expectations is a good idea. So I think that's a good idea, Ken. Certainly something we can work on. And it's also a good opportunity to lay out some plans and goals while you're in prison. Some people like to memorialize, whether it's a video or expressing what it is they're going to do in prison, because it's an opportunity for people to hold you accountable. I think that's a good takeaway for all of you if you have yet to go, whether it's a video or you write a note to people in your community. Articulate what it is you plan to do. I remember when my friend Brad asked me, I said, I just want to lose weight and learn Spanish. That was it. I didn't have this webinar. It would have helped me. I didn't have this community. It would have helped me. It would have been priceless. And I was thankful to meet Michael and get on track. If not, I likely doing something different. So Kent, that's a good idea. And that ties into what I just said. Share a note with your family. Share it as what you plan to do. And then when they visit with you, they're going to ask, are you doing it? When you call home, they're going to learn, are you doing it? Or are you just saying one thing and doing another? That's why some people can't love to kind of memorialize it with a video before they go in, whether it's public or private. I know that's something that Scott Laney did before his surrender. That's something that you should consider doing as well. I'd encourage all of you to invest the time to do that. So we'll work on that, Kent, to answer your question. It won't take a long time.
Cool.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Or Jason, I think I saw your hand up.
Hey, Justin, guys, how y'all doing?
Good.
Have any of you all heard any programs or any off time, if I could use the term, for those of us that are over 60? And I heard a blurb one day that there was some kind of consideration for time served if you're over 60. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I really love the journal. But I'm told that I can't bring any books with me. Of course, I have yours and Michael's and the ones that are important to me. So do we get ordered while we're in?
Yes,
and those are
what
two
I'd encourage you to do is I would create an Amazon book list, and people ask us all the time, what book should I read? It depends where you are in your life. It's like, what should I buy in the commissary? We would advise you to read books that relate to the life you want to live both in prison and after your release. Okay,
But
so
how do you
create a
get
book
them?
list.
That's the thing.
that
That's
keep
the
those
big
goals.
question.
Yeah,
do you
create
get
an Amazon book list, share it with people in this going away letter that we were discussing with Ken. People can order the book and send it to you. So there is a process to ensure a book gets in correctly, that it's going to get in. So I would, prior to your surrender, Jason, Kent, I would go to Amazon, I'd create that book list, I'd share with your community. They'll send them to you. You'll read the book, you'll write a book report, you'll write your journal, you'll send it home. And it's really building your release plan. We've done several webinars already, and we'll do more on the release plan. It's an evolving, growing document. Build these book reports in there. Go ahead,
Let me
Michael.
just throw one other thing in there for our clients. For those who are not on the free service, but those who are our clients, of course, we send the books to you when you get to, as soon as you surrender.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Mike. So we're going to send them.
Yeah,
Jason.
we'll send 5 books to you that'll help you kind of tee up and get started. I would encourage you to visit, Justin. You should share your screen and show them the books and resources and courses page of our website, so people know where their family can go and find the new content we create and publish.
Yep.
Every month we're publishing these things, and they're available on Amazon. But what you can count on it is that we are deeply committed to helping change this system. And that system requires us to work, and it requires you to work. It requires you to do things while you're in there. And that helps me when I'm trying to advocate with wardens, to advocate on the Bureau, to expand these different mechanisms that will allow people to earn freedom and get out sooner. So the more work you do, the stronger I becoming an advocate for all people in the BOP. And these are the different areas of our, white collar advice section versus the prison professors section. In this component, we're always working to advocate to change the system, and you will be getting that information while you're in prison. But the information we send comes with some exercises that we hope you're doing, because we need to show that to administrators. Hey, these people are doing this work. That's what makes them a viable candidate. And that's really what advocates.
So we lost Michael, but we've answered the question. Yes.
We can't help them.
Thank you. Now that we're wrapping up some of those prepared remarks, I see some hands coming up. Cindy, so great to see you. I know Sam touched on the question. In our experience, Cindy, it is $360. Some prisons, I think, limited to $180 every other week. Also, with respect to buying notepads and pens, I believe you can buy pens and notepads, but also in the library, there may be pencils and paper that you can access and use. So you don't necessarily have to buy them, though some people do. Someone commented on, if you have a legal case, you can surrender with that paperwork, right? Legal mail on the outside. Jason asked about anything on 60-year-olds. Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the First Step Act states that if you're 60 or older, you get a third off of that sentence, based on how I understand it. Jason, if I'm wrong, we'll get clarity on that, but that was my understanding of the First Step Act.
Yeah, but
Those who are 60 or older get a
Justin,
third. Yes.
Justin, it's Frank. Sorry, still hoarse. And I also wrote you a little bit of a note, just as an FYI.
Thank you.
With regard to Jason's question, actually had to do with a really great talk that you and I had yesterday. I'm 68, and so you very kindly said, so what does the next 5 years, 10 years, etc. look in your life? And they said, well, 15 years. I said, you could all be coming to my memorial service, tongue in cheek, okay? But are you pretty sure about going in at 69 And then coming out ostensibly on a 1 year, 1 day sentence with earned time credit, that there would be additional time for being 68 or 69 years old.
So, as I understand, Michael, were you able?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the law.
Yeah.
So you can look at the First Step Act. We have it published on our website, where we provide details of that. But I would really recommend, this is an important time for anybody who's going into the system. In going into the system, it's important to recognize that although Congress passes a law, such as the First Step Act, the Bureau of Prisons is an agency that is going through significant challenges in putting this First Step Act together and in place. And it's putting those significant problems in place because this has completely changed the way the mandate of the Bureau of Prisons. When I was in prison, the only thing that mattered, the only thing they cared about was your life during the duration of your sentence. Now they've got a dual mandate. And that second mandate is to get people out as soon as they're qualified. They're just not exercising as well. So that's the reason for self-advocacy, that it's so important to learn this. To answer your question, if you read the First Step Act, and you can find it right on our website, you could search for an area where it talks about the Elderly Offender Program. And the Elderly Offender Program provides that if you're 60 years old or older, you qualify for 1/3 off of your sentence. That said, there are many ways that you're going to benefit with earned time credits that are going to advance your release date, Second Chance Act that is going to advance your release date. So it behooves you to learn as much as you can. And I know it can be overwhelming to go through our entire website, but we are going to tell you, even though the law tells the BOP to do something, you can see right now that Congress is routinely holding congressional hearings because the Bureau of Prisons has failed to implement some of the will of Congress. But the answer to your question, yes, the law does exist. Yes, you should get it. Yes, we can project when you are going to come home, but there are some factors that you can do to advance those dates. And you will learn that as you continue to work through this process. I'm driving now, so I can't give you more than that, but we'll do it when I'm in front of a computer.
Michael, I'd like you to answer, if you would answer Cindy's question. I'll read it to you because you're driving. Cindy wrote, on phone calls, not supposed to talk about a business, how to do things like a lease renewal for a rental property as an example, or a quote for a home repair factor. It may sound like a business, but it's more personal. I don't want to violate anything. How would you respond to Cindy while she's communicating?
Could Cindy unmute herself and have a conversation with me? Because I've got to ask a follow-up in order to answer her question.
Cindy, are you there?
Is that possible?
Yeah, I see, Cindy. I asked her to unmute.
Yeah, I was trying. I'm sorry. Yes.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Cindy. I'm Michael, and I'm happy to respond to your question. Could you give me a little bit more context? Are you suggesting that somebody in prison is going to ask this question for email on how to do something?
Yeah, well, my husband would be the one in prison, and I'm here managing, say, a rental property, just as an example. And it'd be like, oh, well, the lease is up for renewal. Do you want me to increase the rent? Do you want me to replace this hot water heater, or do you want me to have it repaired? It's going to cost X. So it's not really, I mean, it's kind of personal, but I would want his advice and input. But the last thing I want to do is to make it sound like, we're running this rental empire here.
That's a great question. And I'm glad that you're asking the question. And I would encourage every visitor to our website to ask those kinds of questions. Here's how I would respond to that, Cindy. You ask me the question and let me be your husband and respond to it. Ask me any of those questions. I'm going to tell you how I would respond.
Hey, the 4th Street house is up for renewal in June. And we've got a contingency in there that we can escalate the rent by 10%. But I don't want to have to be responsible for the turnover. So is it better just to keep their rent as it is, or should we do that 10% increase?
I really appreciate the question, but yes, you know, there are rules here that stop me from being able to run a business of any kind. If I were home though, I would probably do this. I would probably say, yes, let's go ahead and escalate the rent by 10%, and I would deal with the complications when the complication comes. But I can't give you that advice right now. You're going to have to make your own decision and deal with it as it comes.
Is that a conversation that can be had more privately on an in-person visit and should just sort of be avoided by the phone?
It should always be avoided by the phone. It should always be avoided by email. But if the situation comes up and I'm in prison, and I had many of those kinds of calls in prison, that's how I always prefaced it. I don't want to be misconstrued as I'm running a business, so I can't give you any advice. I can only tell you what I would do if I were not in this situation. But at the end of the day, you are going to have to make the call and live with the decision you make. Now, you and I, of course, have an agreement that if I give you that advice, you effectively, that's what you're going to do anyway. You're going to take what I say, and if we have that relationship, that if I'm telling you what I want you to do, you understand that. But I, as the prisoner, always have to protect myself by saying I can't be construed as running a business right here. So just
So that's
do
a
what
great
you
script.
think.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I hope it's helpful. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Michael. Any other any hands up? Marcus, I see your hand up.
Okay, hey Justin. I know I had spoke. Well, I had went back and forth through text message with you and Sam the other day regarding my designation to Bennettsville. I saw that it was a very small camp. So I just wanted to know, like, I was trying to look stuff up for this camp, but I can't really find anything. I was just wondering, like, is there any pros or cons with it being so small? Like, is there like a lack of programs or stuff like that? Like, I was just trying to get more information on smaller camps.
So that is a small camp. I actually looked it up when you texted me. Let me take a look. 1 second.
There's 80 people at the camp, Justin.
Yeah, sorry about that. 1 moment. Delete that. Sorry. Yeah, it's a small camp. When are you surrendering, Marcus?
January 3rd.
January 3rd. So you go on January 3rd to Bennettsville. So the specific question now, as I understand it, there's certainly going to be programs. There's going to be programs within the camp, and you're going to enroll in as many as possible. To the specific questions of how many programs are there, I don't know the answer to that question, other than to tell you there should be programming there, and as soon as you can, you'll enroll in them. Sam or Michael, I don't know if you have any insights on whether a camp with 80 prisoners will offer much less programming than perhaps a camp with 300 or 400. But as I understand it, there will certainly be some programming there, Marcus.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, so yeah, there's some good advantages. In my view, there's advantages to being in a small camp. And I was in every kind of camp, big camps, small camps. The advantages are you get to develop that more personal relationship with somebody. The nice thing about it is that these programs that are interesting to you, the productive activities or evidence-based programs, they can be self-directed. We're bringing a program in there that's going to be self-directed, and you will be able to use those regardless of what's available in the institution. So don't sweat that kind of stuff. Just focus on, you getting there and just learning everything about the system and getting through it. I need to give you a more fulsome answer, but I'm driving right now and I can't. I just wouldn't worry about the institution. As Lance Armstrong used to say when he ran bike races before the whole scandal, he said it's not about the bike and it's not about the prison. Okay, it's about you and what you are doing, which is the things that you can do. Avoid disciplinary infractions, participate in the FRP program, and you're going to be fine. That's it. It's not, the institution's irrelevant. Your programming, you're going to have access to earn all the earn time credits. And I got to disconnect because I know I'm going into a canyon.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. John, I see your hand up.
Yes, Justin, question about phone calls. If I am speaking with my wife on a phone call and someone else is in the room or in the car, is that considered a shot?
No, that's okay. If you're speaking with your wife when someone else is in the room, that's fine. What you cannot do is engage in a three-way phone call. But certainly if you're speaking with someone and there's someone in the background, you can't control that. Just no three-way phone calls.
Right, but what happens if they start talking to me? That's a no. I gotta stop that conversation right there.
If it's a three-way phone call, that's a hard stop. If you've called someone and they, for some reason, choose to conference somebody in, I would just hang up the phone.
Right, no, I'm not talking about conferencing. I'm talking, she's driving in the car and I'm talking to her and she's got her girlfriend with her and her girlfriend
John,
says,
you're
"Hey, how are
fine.
you?"
John, you're fine with that.
Yeah,
You're fine.
you're okay with that. You can't control if you call home or you call someone in a car and someone else is in there on a simultaneous, also on a phone call. There's that's fine. Just no three-way phone calls.
Excellent. I have one more question. If there's an emergency at home, how does my wife get in touch with me? She calls the prison?
Yes.
Call the counselor or unit manager.
Very good. Counselor or unit manager. Great.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You're very well. Amelia, nice to see you. I see your hand up. Thank you for waiting patiently. We're here.
Hi, Justin. Hi, Sam.
Hi, how are you?
I had a couple questions. Well, first, my husband was at, I think you were there at the sentencing, Justin, for Rob in Orange
I
County.
was,
and-
yes.
Yeah, he was sentenced and sent to county jail, not county jail, but it was Santa Ana jail. And then he was transferred to MDC Los Angeles. He was just assigned and he was transferred on Tuesday of this week to, we had requested the camp in Oregon, but they sent him to Terminal Island in San Pedro, which is here in California, obviously. So there's benefits to that. Obviously, we'll get to visit him more. So he didn't go to Victorville as we had thought maybe they would be sending him. So I thought I'd let you know, because I know Sam and Michael, we had talked about maybe him going to Victorville first and then going to Terminal Island. He arrived there on Tuesday and unfortunately he tested positive for COVID. So they have him in isolation. The whole process that you guys talked about in that last webinar about adjusting to every situation, it's certainly so prevalent here because he's been moved, 3 times now. Hopefully this will be the last stop, but adjusting is very, very difficult. It's something that it takes time, especially if you're in isolation. My next question to you is, in the beginning, obviously we were able to use Sam's expertise and he guided us through the process. We were also with Larry and also with you. You helped us a lot. Now that he has been incarcerated and obviously financially I'm not able to continue to have your services, I'm able to join on these webinars, which are extremely helpful. So thank you guys. Would he be able to receive the books, or do I need to go online and order them so that you guys send him directly? Because I can't send him, right? It would be something that maybe you guys could send him if I buy them, or.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you joining, and I know that it's difficult, and I was at the sentencing hearing, and I remember telling you while he was taken into custody, at least he gets credit for time served today. So the clock is ticking. So there are some benefits to this, and I'm happy to hear that he's close to you. And I know we worked with you prior to sentencing, so count on our team to mail those books to him. Okay, we'll take care of that. So we'll coordinate that a little bit later, but count on us to mail those books. Okay, in the interim, keep attending the webinars, asking questions, and we love that you're here and engaging and learning how to hold him accountable while he's in custody. That will make it easier for everyone as he prepares to come home. So we'll certainly send him those resources. Okay.
Help helping drastically. And then the last question I had, I'm sorry, was now once he was released from quarantine, and maybe this is for Sam, I don't know, is there someone that he, other than obviously the case manager he's working with and advocating for himself, as Michael keeps saying, is there anyone he can reach out to that might, you know, kind of know the process or know kind of how to help him? I don't know if you guys have clients there or people that can want to do that, to reach out to him, maybe. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, we have a few clients there. I will give you a call after and see if we can coordinate something.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Bless you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining. Yeah, on that note, we're so grateful that you're here and you've attended. To close, next week, we're going to be starting next week. There's going to be a change to the webinar. All right, good to see you, bud. Thanks for the email. Next week, we're making a change to the email, to the webinar. It's going to be every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's just going to be one day a week. So tomorrow we'll send out this webinar for people who are unable to attend today. But you'll get plenty of reminders from our team that the webinar schedule is moved to Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. With that said, please use our resources. Please spend time on Prison Professors. Please work on that release plan. Invest the time, come with questions, and we're so grateful that you're part of our community. And we look forward to seeing all of you again next Thursday, not Friday or Saturday, next Thursday. We look forward to it. Thank you all for joining. Thanks, Ken.